Chauncey Billups is one of the more unremarkable Piston greats. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not at all saying he's an unremarkable player because he was a very remarkable player and he was a great player. What I mean about him being unremarkable is that there wasn't really anything flashy about him. His box score production didn't always show how great of a player he was and just how much of an impact he had on his basketball team. But the reality here is that the Pistons have been stuck in hell pretty much the second Chauncey Billups was traded for Allen Iverson. I watched a video from a Funky Diabetic recently, and he nailed it right on the head. The Pistons have never fully recovered from this trade. So in this video, I will be talking about Chauncey's contributions to getting his team to 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals appearances, his impact on the Pistons, his ranks in Pistons history, and I'll also be breaking down some notable point guards that he outplayed in the postseason. Here's what Chauncey's production looked like when he led his team to 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals. If the numbers are bold and underlined, then that includes the entire playoffs. If the numbers are written just regularly with no bold or underline, then that is what his production looked like through 2 rounds, and his conference finals performances are excluded. But in 2003, Chauncey Billups averaged 21.3 points per game, getting his team to the Eastern Conference Finals. In 2004, Chauncey was honestly kind of brutal in the playoffs. He shot under 40% from the field. He did average 16.4 points per game, but shot under 40% from the field. But he turned it on once the NBA Finals came around, and we will be talking about that later in this video. Then in 2005, Chauncey just balled out throughout the entire playoffs, averaging 18.7 points, 6.5 assists, 4.3 rebounds, a steal. Then in 2006, Billups averaged 17.9 points per game, 6.2 assists, and 3.7 rebounds through the first 2 rounds, getting his team to the Eastern Conference Finals. Then in 2007, Chauncey hit over 20 points per game and 7 assists per game, getting his team to the Eastern Conference Finals. Then in 2008, Chauncey was injured a lot during the second round, so his production is a little bit lower than it normally was. But for the first 2 seasons, Ben Wallace was probably the bigger driving force for the Pistons, but after that, Chauncey clearly proved he could absolutely be a Batman, even if his production wasn't always the most world-beating production. Chauncey's individual box score production probably never jumps out to anybody, but it jumps out to you in terms of how he clearly affected his team. On the screen, I got the Pistons' points per game and offensive rating from the 2007-08 season, and the Pistons' defensive rating and points allowed per game for the 2008-2009 season. The 2008-2009 season was the season that Chauncey got traded. In terms of how Billups affected his team's offense, the Pistons averaged 97.5 points per game with Billups, which was 17th, but they had a 111.4 offensive rating, which was 6th in the NBA. And then, the season he got traded, the Pistons' points per game went down to 94.2 points per game, which ranked 28th in the NBA, and their offensive rating took a pretty sizable dip, going from 111.4 to 107.4, which was good for 21st in the NBA. In terms of defense, the Pistons had the number 1 ranked defense in terms of points allowed, only allowing 90.1 points per game, and they had a defensive rating of 102.9, which was 4th in the NBA. Then Chauncey got traded, and the Pistons defense took a bit of a hit as they started giving up 94.7 points per game, which was 8th in the NBA, but their defensive rating was the clear indicator of how much of an impact Chauncey had, as the ranking went from 4th in the NBA to 16th in the NBA. Part of that probably also has to do with Flip Saunders not being there, but I think we can all agree that the second Chauncey was traded, the Pistons have been in a world of hurt. In the 2004 NBA Finals, Chauncey Billups finally broke through and showed how good he was. It wasn't pretty before he got to the finals, though. Through 3 rounds, Billups was averaging 15.3 points, 6.1 assists, 3 rebounds, and 1.4 steals. He wasn't shooting particularly great from the field, shooting below 40%, and he wasn't shooting particularly great from 3 either, shooting lower than 33%. And then in the finals, Billups got his points per game up to 21. His assists took a slight hit, but that's fine. He got his rebounds up, and again his steals went down as well, but Billups was extremely inefficient through 3 rounds. And then in the NBA Finals in 2004, he was very efficient, shooting over 50% from the field, almost 50% from 3, and over 90% from the free throw line. Some notable players that shot 50, 40, 90 in an NBA Finals include Kevin Durant, Magic Johnson, and Joe Dumars. Then in 2005, the Pistons did not win the NBA Finals, but Billups played his heart out. In 2005, through 3 rounds, Billups was averaging a solid 18 points per game, 6.6 assists, 4.1 rebounds, and a steal. He shot a pretty decent field goal percentage, but shot very solid from 3, as he shot 37.1% from 3. Then in the NBA Finals, Billups got his scoring up and his field goal percentage up. His 3-point percentage went down kind of a lot, but his free throw percentage went up in the 2005 NBA Finals. And it's also worth noting that you can make a case that Billups outplayed Tony Parker in that series, and we'll get to that momentarily. One other notable performance he had in the playoffs was when he led the Pistons back from a 3-1 series deficit. In the 3 straight wins that the Pistons had during the Eastern Conference first round, Billups averaged 30.7 points per game and 4.3 assists per game, which led the Pistons, along with 2.7 rebounds and shooting a very solid 49.1% from the field, 37% from 3, and an incredible 96.3% from the free throw line. I just wanted to bring this up real fast because it clearly showed just how much Billups could turn it on when he needed to. So now that I've gone through all that stuff, let's talk about how Billups' production ranks in the history of the Detroit Pistons. In terms of his regular season production, his 7,940 points rank 12th, his 2,984 assists rank 4th, his 495 steals rank 15th, and his 1,559 rebounds rank 9th among guards. All these rankings that I have up here are in terms of Pistons rankings, no other team. His 39.7 3-point percentage ranks 8th in Pistons history, and his 89.2 free throw percentage ranks 1st in Pistons history. In terms of his per game production, with an 82 game minimum, his 16.5 points per game ranked 11th in Pistons history. His 6.2 assists ranked 6th, and his 3.2 rebounds ranked 7th among guards. Now, in terms of his playoff production, his 1,958 points ranked 3rd in Pistons history. His 655 assists are 2nd, his 118 steals are 4th, and his 383 rebounds are 3rd among guards. In terms of his per game averages in the playoffs, with a minimum of 10 playoff games played with the Pistons, Billups averaged 17.6 points per game for the Pistons in the playoffs, which ranks 12th, 5.9 assists, which ranks 3rd, 3.5 rebounds, which is 8th among guards, and his 1.1 steals per game in the playoffs are top 5 in Pistons history. Here are some notable accolades, seasons, and games that Chauncey Billups had as a member of the Pistons. He made 3 All-Star teams with the Pistons. He made 2 All-Defensive Second teams with the Pistons, and he had 1 NBA Finals MVP as a member of the Pistons. His 5 15-point per game and 5 assists per game seasons are 3rd in Pistons history. His 3 seasons of shooting 40% or better from the 3-point line are 2nd in Pistons history, and his 5 seasons of shooting 88% or better from the free throw line are 1st in Pistons history. Chauncey Billups currently holds the Pistons record for most made 3-pointers in a playoff game with 7. His 77, 50, 40, 90 games are 2nd in Pistons history, with Joe Dumars being number 1. His 9 playoff double-doubles are 9th in Pistons history. Isaiah Thomas is number 1 in that category. His 8 20-point, 10 assist, and 5 rebound games are 4th in Pistons history, with, of course, Isaiah Thomas being number 1. I should also note that in terms of his 77 games of shooting 50, 40, and 90, and in terms of his 8 20-point, 10 assist, and 5 rebound games, those 2 categories include the playoffs and the regular season. The last thing I want to go over about Chauncey Billups is how he performed against some notable point guards in the playoffs. In the left column, I have the year it happened, and then in the second column, I have the round in the playoffs in which it happened. The first matchup I want to talk about is how Billups did against Jason Kidd in the 2004 second round. Billups outscored him, shot a better percent from the field, a better percentage from three, and better from the free throw line. Kidd had more assists and steals and rebounds, but Kidd did not shoot very good in that particular series. Billups didn't shoot great in that particular series either, but he still shot better than Kidd did. Now, against Gary Payton in the 2004 NBA Finals, some of you might not really think it's worth noting because Payton was at the end of his career and he wasn't producing that much during the postseason for the Lakers during that particular season, but it's still, to me, worth noting because Billups outplayed him in pretty much every single way. Billups averaged more points, rebounds, assists, along with shooting better from the field, from three, and from the free throw line. And against Tony Parker in the 2005 finals, Billups didn't win the series, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he got outplayed by Tony Parker. Parker was not yet in his prime, but he was still a very good point guard at the time that Billups went against him. Billups averaged more points, he averaged more rebounds, and more assists, along with more steals. And he turned the ball over less. He didn't shoot better from the field than Parker did, but Billups outperformed Parker in many other categories. Now, I know one of the arguments is going to be, yeah, but who won the series? Just because the player won the series doesn't mean he outperforms the opposing point guard. There's a lot of factors that affect whether a team wins or loses. One player does not always single-handedly determine the outcome of a series. In this case, Parker did not single-handedly determine the outcome of the NBA Finals in 2005. And in this particular case, Chauncey Billups produced better than Parker did. So Chauncey Billups didn't really always blow up the box score, but he was still a great player. And he could outperform players that are probably viewed as better than him when he needed to. And he could be very efficient when he needed to. He played solid defense. He found ways to involve his teammates. He found ways to make players around him better. He elevated the Pistons a lot more than the stats probably ever showed. And Chauncey Billups, of course, most certainly deserves consideration as a top 10 Piston of all time. Well, that will be all for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.